So another topic we heard a lot from the attendees at the conference was inherited clutter, which we've talked about in the podcast before.
Yes.
But a lot of their clients are coming in, they're inheriting their parents' homes. We've talked about this before with the sandwich generation and millennials are really getting the brunt of that sometimes. So if their parents haven't taken the time to go through their items or have those conversations with their kids of like this is why this item is important, or this is what I would like to happen with this item, then they just feel so overwhelmed and stressed on top of usually grief and bereavement from either having to put a parent in a home and downsize them, or their parent has passed away and now it's how do I honor this person, how do I grieve, and trying to balance all those feelings and emotions.
And again, honoring a loved one who's passed and also honoring my space and what I need and want in life too, it can be really challenging to balance that all out.
Welcome to Reframe and Reclaim. We are Courtney Huckabee, a psychotherapist,
and Jen Harris, an interior designer, who have teamed up
to reflect,
challenge,
and reframe your mindset in relationship with your personal belongings. Find the reframe.
Start your reclaim.
Hi, welcome back to Reframe and Reclaim. I'm Courtney Huckabee.
And I'm Jen Harris.
And we are joining you today from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Woo-hoo.
So we drove all the way from our home state of Texas to our neighboring state of New Mexico to join the New Mexico Counseling Association conference this weekend.
Yes. And overall, it was a fantastic conference.
Wonderful.
So much validation for the topic we cover and, how much need there is in so many different communities. So I've enjoyed the conference. What about you, Courtney?
I loved this conference. Again, working with mental health professionals, therapists, social workers. That's my wheelhouse. It's my jam. And we met with so many amazing people. We made great connections.
Yes.
And so we're really excited that we made so many connections and so many connections and friends that we're actually invited back for the National Association for Social Workers New Mexico chapter conference that is coming up this summer in June.
Yeah, and along with those connections, like this is the first conference I've been to where I really just felt so deeply connected with the people. Like I would see people come to our booth, we talked to them, we'd exchange names, and I'd see them later at the conference. I'm like, hey, so and so, hey, what are you doing? And it was very friendly, very familial,
hospitable.
Almost. Yeah, like everybody was just so great.
Yeah. So thank you, New Mexico, for being so welcoming to us Texans. It's very nice to be here.
Great food too. I've loved being able to explore the city.
Yeah. So one of the great things about being here at a mental health conference is we're hearing a lot of the same things that I've been talking about in our book. Clients who they're working with, they're like, oh my gosh, my client has talked about the stressors of their home, and we don't realize how much like our home environment really does impact our mental and emotional health. And it was just really validating that a lot of other therapists are hearing the same thing with their clients as well.
Yes, and that's why one thing that is so important, and I can speak for myself personally, why it's so important to take a step back once you go through the see clean step and see the space empty, because then it really does give you a different perspective.
It does.
And you check in, and you're like, how do I feel seeing the space empty as opposed to full with all the things before? And you're like, oh, it does feel lighter. And then you don't even realize how much stress all that clutter was really causing you.
Yeah, we kind of get to this place of like, this is how I'm always stressed. So it doesn't feel stressful, but it's just like a buzzing stress. And actually 55% of Americans do feel stressed by their home and disorganization. So it's very common and prevalent. And not to say that 55% of Americans have a disorganized home, but when it is disorganized or when it is untidy, it can create an increase in those cortisol stress levels for any of us, but especially it impacts women.
Yes, for sure. I felt that. Have you felt
all the time? All the time. Yes, especially living with myself and a almost 5-year-old and a husband and a dog. There's so much to keep up with, and those who have multiple children or multi-generational homes, or those who have roommates, and you're like, how do we cohabitate and share the load, but also respect each other's boundaries? It can be really challenging.
So I know we've talked about before how it raises the cortisol levels in women. What about children? How can clutter really affect children?
So they're actually in our research that we've done writing the book and revisiting those stats, many children who live in a disorganized or cluttered space actually score lower on cognitive tests, which is that cognitive processing, critical thinking. They can also have shorter attention spans and really struggle with attention and focus. So, adults, we of course are impacted, but children are just smaller adults who are very much impacted by the same kind of struggles that we are.
Yes, I know my 7-year old, one day I cleaned off the kitchen counter and he came home and he was like, "Did you redo the kitchen?" And it's like, no, you can just see the countertops now. So he noticed. I was very surprised, like how much he took it in.
And I will say something I've seen in my 4 almost 5 year old is he has a playroom that is, part of our common area. And when that playroom gets played in and explored and really fun
Mm-hmm.
and we don't pick up, he actually starts playing in a different space.
Mm.
So when we work together in cleaning it up, he'll say, "Oh, mom, I want to play with this different toy." And so it can create stress. So he just redirects to a new space. And that's what we do typically too. Let me find a cleaner space or a different space.
Yes.
And so that can just create some domino effect of leaving it for later. And so
I mean,
it's
yeah. I mean,
challenge.
how many of us have been like, "Oh, I need to clear this off. I have this pile of papers. I'm just going to put it in this other room for now,
Me.
for the band-aid." Yeah, me too. So, yeah, we all do that, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Another really great statistic is that if we actually do that process of decluttering and thinning out the things in our home that we aren't really needing or using, it can reduce our home chores and responsibilities by up to 40%.
Oh, amazing. Who wouldn't love 40% less chore time?
Well, what would you do with an extra 40% of time in your day?
Well, for anyone who knows me well or has listened to the podcast before, I'd probably take a nap
Yes.
and then maybe have some charcuterie or be on a patio with friends or with family. But
Yes.
what about you?
I think I might watch TV. I don't watch very
Oh.
much TV, but it is really great just to do some mindless watching. But I will say most Americans are spending some part of their day doing some home chore, cleaning dishes,
Mhm.
cleaning up and tidying. But reducing that by 40%, like that gives me a lot of reason to do that. So
It's a
maybe
big motivator.
I
Yeah.
don't need 50 pairs of shoes, maybe just 20 pairs of shoes. Or my child doesn't need 200 toys, maybe 50 toys. And then actually, there's additional
Yeah.
statistics that most children will be more playful with 12 toys, honestly, of all of their toys on a regular basis.
Yeah. So you might think like, oh, I want to give them all the newest things and, try out, give them all the things we didn't have, right? But
Sure.
it's actually can be, inhibiting them from actually playing.
Yeah, and I will say the more toys that you have that don't have like the sounds and the
Mm.
lights and the bells and the whistles, the more creative and imaginative your children's play will be, which is so important for their minds and their imagination and critical thinking and outside the box thinking.
Yes. So another topic we heard a lot from the attendees at the conference was inherited clutter, which we've talked about in the podcast before.
Yes.
But a lot of their clients are coming in, they're inheriting their parents' homes. We've talked about this before with the sandwich generation and millennials are really getting the brunt of that sometimes. So if their parents haven't taken the time to go through their items or have those conversations with their kids of like
Mhm.
this is why this item is important or this is what I would like to happen with this item, then they just feel so overwhelmed and stressed on top of usually grief and bereavement from either having to put a parent in a home and downsize them or their parent has passed away and now it's how do I honor this person, how do I grieve, and
And
trying to balance all those feelings and emotions.
and again, honoring a loved one who's passed and also honoring my space and what I need and want in life too, it can be really challenging to balance that all
Yes.
out. And so, we heard like a culture here in New Mexico, a lot of times, if they are part of the indigenous community or the native community, like they do have people who are like, this is our property and you are inheriting a home. You're not just
Mm-hmm.
inheriting like this cool watch, like you're inheriting all of their belongings, and it is the responsibility of that next generation to figure that out. And so, I can definitely see how that might just be like an additional complexity to that. And
Yes.
so,
And another great thing was people who came by the booth and or table, I should say, and bought our book. A lot of them are going to be using those reflective questions and those strategies with clients, or they bought the book to share with their office. So that way everybody can help their clients. Because that's really what we're here for, is to help
Oh,
people
yeah.
move through these feelings.
Yeah. And again, Jen started with her own journey and,
Mhm.
kind of making sense of her grieving process and also making sense of her belongings and what that meant for her and how to, fix the things that she was feeling, obligation and grief and
Yes.
guilt and
Guilt, shame, all the
but
things.
that's very common. All of those emotions are very common whenever you're trying to figure out how to honor someone, but also figuring out how to honor yourself. And those things, it needs a little bit of work sometimes. So our book is really written in the 7-step process, which is the reclaim. And then at the end of each chapter, if you're a reader reading that, it's asking you like for your process. Here's some things to
Mhm.
think about. Here's some things to get perspective on to understand where you're at. And if you're ready, here are some small actionable next steps to take.
And the thing I love about, therapists using the book is they're already working with the clients. They already have the trust. And so they already have that first step accomplished, and they're able to just layer these questions on, or these strategies to help people take that next step forward. So,
Yeah. And if you are a therapist, the book is written in a person centered, solution focused theory. So it is up to the client, it is up to the reader to decide what they need, it is up to the reader to express and experience how they're feeling, and it's up to the individual to decide what they want for their space, what property or belongings they want to keep, what they're ready to hand off to another family member or friend, and what they're ready to discard.
and I really love this because it's not someone saying this is what you have to do. This is
Right.
the right way. This is the wrong way. Because everybody's in different chapters of their life, have different lifestyles. And so it can really be tailored to you and your needs.
Yeah, it's definitely a 7-step process,
Mhm.
but the actual steps that you take in each of those 7 steps is really up to the individual.
Yes. So I had a great time at the conference. I felt like it
Yes.
was really great being here. We love you, New Mexico. This was so great.
Thank you for being so
Yes.
hospitable and welcoming and inviting us to come back. So we're really excited to come back this summer and share more.
Mhm.
I'm actually submitting a proposal to talk more with therapists about the book and the process and how to use that with clients.
Mhm.
But if you are a therapist or a mental health worker, social worker, and you'd like more information about our book, you can go to our website. You can find us on social media as well, or just send us a message or an email.
Yeah. So if you're in New Mexico, we'll see you in June. If you're on the listening to the podcast, we'll see you next week.